Deep in the dense forest stood an old hut. Its weathered exterior was eerie, its window panes cracked and broken. Local legends told tales of the hut's dark history and the unspeakable horrors that occurred within its walls. Eager for an adrenaline rush, my friends and I decided to explore the cabin and uncover its secrets, so we entered the forest. A cold wind blew through the trees and they arrived at the front of the hut gasping for breath. The pale light of the moon cast an eerie shadow over the hut, heightening the sense of foreboding. Entering the hut with trepidation, they found the inside of the hut shrouded in darkness. The air was filled with a heavy silence, interrupted only by the faint sound of footsteps echoing in the empty room. The flickering candlelight revealed glimpses of grotesque paintings on the walls, which depicted nightmarish scenes of agony and despair. As we moved deeper into the hut, a sense of unease overcame us. The air became heavier and more suffocating, and the familiar layout of the cabin began to change and distort. The hallways stretched unnaturally, doors led nowhere, and the stairs twisted and spiraled like the coils of a snake. Barely audible whispers filled the air, their words laced with malice. Shadows danced on the walls, defying logic and sending chills down my spine. The hut seemed alive, a sentient being that toyed with their fears. Suddenly, a piercing scream came from one of their companions. I turned to see my companion writhing in pain, his body deformed into a grotesque shape. Limbs elongated, bones broken and twisted, the once human figure contorted into a nightmarish face. The transformation was complete, and the creature born of their friends' darkest fears stood before them. The remaining friends panicked as they realized they were trapped in a nightmare beyond comprehension. With each step, each door opened, they were led deeper into the horror of the cabin, their hearts pounding with fear. They fought against the darkness that surrounded them, but their efforts were in vain. One by one, they succumbed to the malice of the shack, their bodies twisted and deformed, their minds consumed by madness. Their screams broke through the walls and became a symphony of pain that echoed through the night. The cabin enjoyed their pain and fed on their fear and despair. It absorbed their essence, growing stronger and more insidious with each passing hour. It became a presence of pure terror, a vessel for the darkness that dwelled within. Their souls merged with the cabin. They are long gone from this world. As the years passed, the cabin became a grim reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. Locals avoided the place, fearing it was haunted. But tales of the cabin's insatiable hunger for souls and its insidious power to transform innocent people into monsters were persistently whispered. The hut was a haunting presence that lingered in the forest, waiting patiently for its next victim. The huts hungered for the fear, anguish, and essence of their victims, and when they stepped onto its threshold, the hut unleashed a nightmare so terrifying and unspeakable that it was impossible to describe. Aspen was called to speak with a lawyer over a cabin property left in a will by a distant family member. By distant family, he meant someone he had never heard of, and he was not close enough to his parents to ask them about him. He got up early and went to a local law firm at the appointed time. The lawyer didn't say much, but handed him a long brown envelope. He then placed a sheet of paper on the desk for Aspen to read and sign. When he got home, he sat down at the counter of the island and opened what the lawyer handed him. In it was a deed, a letter, and a set of keys. The letter read, "To those to whom the cabin has been deeded. I apologize at the outset, but be warned that not all shadows are what they seem." Aspen was confused. "Not all shadows are what they seem." Aspen repeated the words aloud, as if trying to make sense of them. Then he decided that it must be the ravings of someone who had lost his sanity in the last moments of his life. He called his best friend Jay, who likes the supernatural and the unknown, to go with him. If anything, we might be able to figure it out together. If I had said no, Jay might still be here. Shades of orange, red, and pink leaked through the trees, indicating the time they had arrived. "At least we got there before dark," Jay said. "If only someone had gotten up on time, we could have gotten there sooner," Aspen said, as she opened the trunk and pulled out her luggage. "I told you I was sorry." Jay mumbled as Aspen pulled out his backpack and duffel bag. Aspen grabbed her keys and opened the cabin door. The abandoned cabin was surprisingly clean. Too clean. Aspen was thankful that some of the furniture had been left behind. It would make it easier to set up the equipment Jay had brought. They agreed that it would be nice to stay together in the same room. As night fell, they were deciding which of them would take first watch. "I'll stay up, I'll stay awake. If I find anything, I'll wake you up," Jay suggested. Aspen reluctantly agreed and went into his sleeping bag, leaving Jay to take the first watch. Much later, Aspen opened his eyes in the dimly lit room and slowly searched for Jay. Without blinking, Jay huddled in the corner of the room, staring up at the right edge of the ceiling. As he was about to speak, Jay looked over at him and put a finger to his lips. Jay then slowly pointed to where he was staring. Aspen looked up and his eyes met with something that had entered that small corner, and the blood drained from his face. Its limbs were long and slender. Its torso was a swirling dark mass. It opened its white, empty eye sockets and looked at Aspen as if smiling. In fact, it did. Beneath its nose was a toothless white smile, twisted unnaturally upward. Aspen chuckled and began to crawl slowly along the wall. "Let's go," Aspen said to Jay. He slowly began to sit upright, watching his best friend out of the corner of his eye. Jay nodded and began to move himself as the swirling mass of shadows reached the height of the ceiling and slowly began to crawl toward them. Aspen was the first to reach the exit, opened the door, and ran out. He stepped into the night air and was about to speak to Jay when he saw that Jay was wrapped in the long arms of a shadow. The shadow was still smiling at Aspen, its hideous mouth twisted into a terrible smile as it walked back into the darkness of the cabin. The door slammed shut by itself and Jay's screams of terror echoed from within. It would be the last time Aspen would see Jay, and it would be the last time he would ever return to the shadow hut. Once upon a time, in a small isolated village on the edge of a dense and ominous forest, the villagers whispered about a hut deep in the woods. They say it is a haunted hut, cursed by a terrible event that took place there many years ago. No one dared to go near the hut, and those who happened to come across it were never seen again. One stormy night, eager to prove their bravery and disprove the story as mere superstition, a group of friends decided to explore the cabin. They were Alex, Sarah, and Jake. With their hearts racing in anticipation, they prepared their flashlights and set out on their daring adventure. They made their way deeper into the forest with the wind howling and lightning illuminating the twisted branches above their heads. The companions grew more and more anxious, but determined to face their fears, they pressed on. Finally, they reached a hut. The hut was dilapidated and overgrown, its windows shattered, its door creaking in an ominous wind. I took a deep breath and went inside. Inside, the smell of decay filled the air. Shining my flashlight, I saw that the room was covered in dust and cobwebs, and remnants of furniture were strewn about. A search of the cabin revealed old newspaper clippings and letters detailing the gruesome tragedy that had befallen the family that once lived there. The friends felt a chill run down their spines as they read about the cruel end of their family. Unbeknownst to them, the spirits of those who had died were still haunting the cabin, bound to the place where their lives had been so cruelly taken. Suddenly, the door to the cabin slammed shut, enveloping their friends in darkness. Their flashlights flickered on and off, leaving them blinded and confused. Panicked, they tried to find their way back to the entrance, but the cabin changed and the walls shifted and closed in around them. As they stumbled through the darkness, they began to hear soft, ominous whispers. The spirits sensed their presence and were hungry for revenge. My friends felt a cold breath on their necks and felt an invisible presence closing in on them. First, Sarah disappeared with a blood-curdling scream and was taken away into the shadows by an unseen force. Then Jake was dragged away, and desperate screams echoed through the cabin. Terrified and alone, Alex stumbled upon a hidden room. The room was filled with the decomposing bodies of those who had come before them, their faces contorted in eternal agony. Driven to despair, Alex struggled against the oppressive darkness in an attempt to escape the cabin's accursed grip. As Alex tried to scratch at the door, the spirits came closer, their whispers louder and more menacing. With his last ounce of strength, Alex pried the door open and staggered out into the storm, falling to the cold, wet ground. The hut dissolved into darkness, and the evil presence seemed to disappear. Beaten and shaken, Alex managed to crawl back to the village, forever changed from the horror of the forgotten hut. The villagers were relieved that Alex had made it back alive, but remained anxious, for they knew that the spirit of the hut was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next victim to stumble upon the haunted dwelling hidden in the woods. Thus, the legend of the forgotten hut lived on, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks deep in the forest and in the hearts of men.